Hey guys, welcome back to another in-depth SAT walkthrough. Now this one is going to be on passage 4 of SAT practice test number 2. As usual, we will be finding the correct answers objectively, solely based on evidence through the text. At times, I will probably be providing more than enough evidence, so I encourage you to think of the easiest evidence you can find to choose the correct answer. Now let's get onto the passage and take a scan. Okay, so first, we look at the author, right? So it's by Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So she's a pretty famous woman suffragist, and it's gonna be in 1869. Now that's a bit far back, so some of the grammar and word choice may not be as familiar to us, which means you shouldn't worry if you get confused a little bit. But I'm here to solve the confusion for you. Okay. So first, I urge a 16th Amendment because manhood, suffrage, men's government, blah blah blah, civil, religious, social disorganization. So she's saying that men's government is bad, essentially. Okay, keep going. There's more bad stuff. Okay, there's so much bad stuff that I'm just gonna stop underlining. So violence, conquest, all bad stuff, discord, death, blood, cruelty. Okay, lots of bad stuff. Okay, and something about no more mercy and stuff like that. Just a whole list. I'm gonna just do this whole list of bad stuff that's associated with men's government, at least in Miss Stanton's view. Okay, 15. The male element has held high carnival this far. Right from the beginning, overpowering, crushing female elements and divine qualities, human nature. And then we knew women compared with until last century. So the last century, women has been finally more respected, their powers and qualities more respected. Before that, it's just all been the male element dominating females. Okay, so society is man basically. Okay, so iron rule, hard iron rule. So women are being forced to do certain stuff, certain ways everywhere. Okay, everywhere, and state, home, everything. There's no wonder. Okay, blah 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 blah. Okay, people object to the demands of those who they choose to call strong-minded because right of suffrage. Okay, strong-minded, right of suffrage. Okay, so right of strong-minded refers to the women who are calling for the rights of suffrage, it seems like. Okay. Few women in the best sense. Too many women. Okay, so there's actually too many women who are, in her view, diluted and reflects male characteristics than women characteristics. So women being purely women, there are only a few of those. Most women are just reflection of what the man wants them to do. Okay, the strong natural characteristic repressed. Okay, I should go back and underline that. I like to underline. For feeds women. Okay, keeps for whole near as man possible, reflecting on vices, virtual vices. Okay, she must respect women. Okay, so here it's like, okay, women are not given a choice, and they have to be as pleasant to the man as possible, basically, because the guy feeds the woman. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, God. Okay, so man has been, while she, if not, has been in control him. Okay, a bunch of stuff about men's influence on women and just how life for women is until we reach and now. where I think there's a break kind of. So now man sees what the world is, and how he has ruined it, apparently, according to Stanton. And now there needs to be some female characteristic to lift man into the higher realms of thought and action. Okay, so let's underline that. We ask women's enfranchisement, so they're asking for women's vote. They want to kind of give women the power to change the masculine world so that it's more fair and stuff like that, I guess. Okay, keep going. Speaking of the masculine image, okay. Alright, so this is a qualification. Okay, here's a qualification. She's saying that, alright, I'm not saying that men are all bad. I'm just saying that certain characteristics associated to men are bad, and certain those qualities are, love of conquest, desire for like to conquer like nature, and powers of destruction, and those characteristics are bad, and not all men are bad. So they're drawing a distinction between men and characteristics. And then now we have great conservator, woman's love is permitted to assert itself. Okay. Alright, pretty typical concluding paragraph about how the world will be like with women. Okay, just put C here, I suppose. Alright, let's kind of go back and just label what each paragraph, what each section is about. Okay, so the first paragraph and leading into the second paragraph, I would say this is all something about the world of men. The world under the rule of men. Okay, and she clearly describes this world as something quite terrible, with a whole list of just descriptions about how terrible it is to live there, and then talks about female being suppressed, I suppose. And then now even further on, carrying out maybe some of the last part of this paragraph, is women in men's world, how they're forced to behave and to keep a foothold in the society, what they have to do to, okay, let's do that, what they have to do to please men, and that goes a bit on too. But until it reaches here, where there's a need for women, where men has realized that they have kind of messed up, and there's now a need for women to step in and cure the world, supposedly. So this is going to be women's rule. So I'm going to say need for women rule. That continues on to right here, where she talks a little bit about how the world will look like with women as a ruler. Well, not as the ruler, but like just influencing politics and making laws and stuff like that. Let's go here. We already talked about this a bit. So there's a qualification where she's like, okay, not all men are bad. Please don't like confuse this with every man. That's what she's trying to say. And it's saying that a section of men are bad. And what I'm really blaming is the male characteristics. So this is going to be men versus characteristic thing, and that will actually come up in a question later on as well. So we're going to discuss that a little bit further then. And the very last paragraph is a conclusion, and it's kind of similar to the need for a woman rule section, where she describes a bit about how the world will look like with women being more influential. Okay, now that we have a rough idea of where all the key concepts are, let's jump into the questions themselves. So 33. The central problem that Stanton describes in the passage is that women have been denied educational opportunities from reaching their potential. Okay, so let me use a different color here. I want to change it to maybe green to make it show better. Okay, so is there any mentioning of education in the passage? Not really. It talks about votes. It talks about suppression of female characteristics, but it never discussed anything about education. So there's a lack of evidence for education. Let's look at reaching potential. Well, yeah, women have been kept from reaching their potential, but the author blames that on male elements, where male elements has been overpowering the female element everywhere. She doesn't blame this on a lack of education. She blames it on something else. So that makes A incorrect. B, prevented from exerting their positive influence on men, which has led to social breakdown. So we got social breakdown, positive influence, and prevented from. Now, the one that's easiest for me to find evidence that just completely strikes out is social breakdown, because of the entire list here that's describing a society that's kind of chaotic. Okay, what she describes as the men's world. Okay, and that is the societal breakdown. So plenty of evidence for that, and it's caused by men too. So there's right there, right? So what is this positive influence that's being blocked from the men and causing men to break down society? Well, that positive influence is assumed, well, not just assumed, is depicted as the female characters. Okay, so we got purity, virtue, and morality, stuff that's absent from the male society and has the potential to lift men up from their terrible situation. Okay, and then is there any evidence of people preventing women from exerting that? Well, yeah, let's go back to something we visited before. Women are being overpowered by men. The female elements, which are purity, virtue, and morality, and similar ideals, are being overpowered by men, which leads to all of these terrible stuff in paragraph 1. So there's plenty of evidence for part B. Every element we underline are supported by evidence from the text directly. Okay, let's go to C. Prevented from voting, which has resulted in poor candidates winning important elections. All right, voting, definitely something mentioned, right? Lots of idea of suffrage. I can find one right here. So right of suffrage, and there's another one I think right here. Women enfranchisement. So that means right to vote. Okay. But is there any idea of important elections? Are there mentioning of poor candidates? Well, you could probably argue in your typical English class that that's what she's hinting at. But because this is an SAT and we have to be very strict about everything in the passage, we have to find direct mentioning of these elements. And there's just no mentioning of poor candidates or any elections. There's only mentioning of voting. But because of the absence of evidence for the other two important elements, we know that C has to be an incorrect answer. Let's cross that out. D, blocked by men from serving as legislators, which has allowed the creation of unjust laws. Okay, blocked by men is an idea we discussed in part B. So we know that there is blocking by men, but is this blocking talking about blocking of legislators? Well, not really, because in the passage we don't see any mentioning of legislators, right? We see a lots of stuff about positive influence and characters of women, but we don't see mentioning of legislators. Okay, and that absence makes D incorrect itself. Okay. There's something else that's even worse, is that unjust laws. Okay, these unjust laws has been credited to terrible male leaders, but again, there's no mentioning of the creation of these laws. Okay, and because of the twofold incorrectness, we're going to cross D out and select B as the correct answer. Okay, 34. Stanton uses the phrase high carnival, line 15, mainly to emphasize that she sees as, okay, let's go back and find where high carnival is. So, has held high carnival thus far. Okay, get the H there. Okay, is it other dominance of women by men? Well, yeah, because we see right here that there's ideas of overpowering and crushing. And these two words relate to other dominance. And who is being crushed here? Well, what is being crushed here is the female element. And female element is a perfect reinstatement of woman. Okay, and what is crushing the female element? Well, it's the male element. And who exhibit male elements? Well, male, right? So men. And that means every part of part A, basically every word here, is directly connected to a phrase in the passage. So that makes A a very possible answer. We're going to leave that open. B, is it free-willing spirit of the age? Now this is appealing to the actual idea of a high carnival, right? We're talking about rides. We're talking about shows and stuff like that. And we know that here, this is more of a metaphor. We're not talking about actual carnival with rides and stuff like that. So we know that B has to be incorrect. C, scandalous decline in moral values. So we're going to have to talk about what decline means. So decline is you have something at the start. So the author will say at the beginning we have this amount of moral values, and at the end we have only maybe half as much, and that would signal a decline in moral values. So we need something in the beginning and something at the end. Let's look for something in the beginning. Well, very nicely we see the male element has ran riot from the beginning. So we see what happened in the beginning, but is there anything in the end? And that's where we have a problem, because the author never mentions something about the end. It doesn't talk about any kind of progress. It just states that the author just simply states that the male element has been ruling thus far. Okay, and because of the absence of any comparison between beginning and end, we know that C has to be incorrect. Okay, last choice here, D, the growing power of women in society. This is kind of a silly choice because we know in the second paragraph that the male element has been dominating women. So there's absolutely no possibility that the growing power of women in society is what the author is trying to talk about in referring to high carnival. Okay, so D is incorrect, and that leaves A to be the only correct answer. Okay, 35. Stanton claims that which of the following was a relatively recent historical development? Is it the control of society by men? That one is pretty obvious that it's incorrect, because just going back from what we were talking about before, we know that the male element has been running wild since the beginning. That can't be a recent historical development. Absolutely incorrect. B, the spread of war and injustice. Okay, so war and injustice, we got a huge list here, and surely it's got something talking about war and injustice, right? We got slaughter, that's kind of like war. We got cruelty, we got violence. Oh, war itself, right there, right? And all of these has resorted to humans struggled for centuries. Okay, and centuries isn't really a modern development, and we know that those stuff she accredits to the male element, and male element has been at the beginning. So similarly to choice A, we know that B has been around for a long time and not a recent historical development. C, the domination of domestic life by men. Going back to the same paragraph as before, paragraph 2 has been proven to be a very important paragraph. We know that the domestic domination, is referred here with the iron rule that women feel at home, and we could also see that with the male element overpowering the female element everywhere, right? So these two instances all relate to what has been happening since the beginning. And again, just like B and A and B, that means that it's not a recent historical development. Cross that out. D, the acknowledgement of women's true behavior, true character. Where can we see that? Well, we see it. I think we see it right here. So recognizing the woman power has been a recent development, right? In the last century, that's the most recent we have been so far. And the true character, the acknowledgement is indeed a recent historical development. So that makes D the correct answer choice. 36. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So that's a pretty easy one. So we saw that over here, recognized as a power until within the last century. So that's around 20. So it should like include 20 at least. So anything that includes 20, lines 15 to 22. Okay, yeah, great. Maybe this one. Let's go check it out. 15 to 20. Yeah, that's where we were before, right? Pretty obvious. Talks about how female power has just been recognized as a power in the last century, so that makes B the correct answer. But as good test takers, we should always check out the other choices as well, right? Okay, lines 3 to 7. 3 to 7. The male element has been a destructive force. Okay, so this we have actually discussed before, and this like it's been going on for centuries, right? And it doesn't relate to the power. It doesn't relate to women characters at all. So that makes A incorrect, contradicting D. C, lines 22 to 25. 22 to 25. Society is but a reflection of man, untempered by woman's thought. Okay, so the hard iron rule part, that's supposed to appeal to part C, to choice C here, but we know that choice C is wrong, and that makes this choice C also incorrect. D, lines 48 to 52. 48 to 52. Right here, so man has been molding. Okay, yet again, it's not talking about the acknowledgement of women's true character, so we know that D cannot possibly support choice D in number 35. That makes D incorrect. Moving on to 37. As used in line 24, rule most nearly, okay, let's get rid of that very useless word there. Can only be one correct answer anyways. As used in line 24, rule refers to, let's find that first, so 24. Where is that? Right here. So it's supposed to be something that could be described as a hard iron. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, is it a general guideline? Well, a general guideline would suggest that it's not so harsh, and you could just choose to follow it if you want, and you could choose to follow it, choose to ignore it if you don't want to follow it. But such a thing would not be described as, ironclad, right, or hard iron, right? So it doesn't fit in the context, and we know that females have no choice in this matter, and they have to follow the male element because it's been dominating, it's been crushing the female element everywhere. So being a guideline doesn't make any sense. I think we need something more dominating. So B, a controlling force. Okay, well that sounds dominating already. Could that be it? So can you describe a force as hard iron? Well, yeah, sure you can. And again, the idea of overpowering and crushing sounds like a force, right? And it will be a controlling force. So that makes B a supported answer choice. Let's keep it open. C, is it an established habit? Well, C and A have the similar problem where habit is something that's way too mild, and it's something that you could probably have a choice in. And we know that habits cannot be described as hard iron, and women have no choice but to follow men in this context. So C is incorrect. D, a procedural method. Well, this would suggest that there's something like step 1, step 2, and step 3, and the author just simply never mentioned any kind of steps to getting women to follow the orders of men. It just said that at the beginning, since the beginning, that's what's been happening, right? So that makes D an incorrect answer, one that is unsupported by the text. So that, check B. Okay, 38. It can reasonably be inferred that strong-minded, line 32, was a term generally intended to, okay, so strong-minded, let's find line 32, strong-minded, and actually when we go back I want to cross out some words, so strong-minded, oh, that's a bit too much, just strong-minded, and strong-minded. Oh, great, there we go. So I actually want to cross out reasonably inferred, because inferred suggests that we have to get a subjective feel for the answer choice. But as we discussed earlier, all the answer choices must be supported explicitly by the text, and that's just a word trying to make. That's just a word that SAT uses to try to confuse poor students. Such a terrible test. Generally intended to praise women who fight for their long denied rights. Okay, so we need to talk about praise and long denied rights. So the long denied rights is very obvious. That is referring to the right of suffrage, right? But is there any sense of praise? Well, who are the people? So the people who are called strong-minded are those who are calling for the right of suffrage, but the people object to the demands of the strong-minded. So that suggests, that didn't just suggest, that obviously mean that these people are not on the same side. They're not supporting the strong-minded individuals, right? So that means they can't be praising women. They're on opposite sides. They're objecting to what the women are doing to fight for their long denied rights. So that makes A incorrect. B, identify women who demonstrate intellectual skill. Okay, the idea of intellectual skill is absent from the text. There's no mentioning of intelligence anywhere, and again, B would be incorrect. C, criticize women who entered male-dominated positions or professions. Well, the idea of criticize, we said before, relates to object here, and that's supported. But male-dominated professions is absent, because while the author talks about right of suffrage will make women masculine, and like these are people who want the right of suffrage, the author never discussed women entering or getting a job of any kind, which they would have to do if you're talking about professions, right? And thus C is incorrect because of the absence of any kind of job in the passage. D, condemn women who agitate for the vote for their sex. So we already know that the condemn part is correct, but are they talking about the vote for their sex? Well, what sex is this? This is woman, and pretty obvious that the right of suffrage will make women masculine. There's this connection right here between the right of suffrage and women, and that reinstates the idea here was women agitating for the vote for themselves, and makes D a very well supported answer choice. 39. As used in line 36, best most nearly means, okay, let's look at where best appears. 36, oh, here we go. I even underlined it before. Okay, there we go. Let's go back. So let's replace best with the word superior and see what happens. So though we have few women in the superior sense. Alright, that already doesn't seem correct because there's only one sense occurring in the passage. Right? There's only this bad sense. There's no other senses that we're comparing to, so we can't say one sense is superior. Right? So because superior is a word that you have to use in conjunction with something else to compare two different levels, or at least two different levels of senses. Right? Because of the absence of such comparison, we're gonna cross A off. B, excellent. See, we have few women in the excellent sense. Well, excellent refers to an idea of, great or amazing and stuff like that. And we just don't see the author praising this kind of sense or in any way, right? We just see a clear statement. We don't see any description of, happiness or greatness or anything like that. So the idea of excellent is also absent from the text. Cross that out. C, genuine. We have few women in the genuine sense. Well, if you have few women in genuine sense, well, what do we have to need? What do we need the author to say further? We need to say the author to say something like there are many women who have an impure sense. Okay, and we have that right here because there's a mentioning of women with dilution, with reflections of the masculine gender, right? So that's women with male characteristics. And we know that men and women are two different sexes. So having male characteristics, having reflecting male gender would mean that the woman is not genuine. There's some, I suppose, if you will, impurities. Okay, not the best word to describe woman, but that's what the author is trying to say. So that means C is a supported answer choice. We're going to leave it open for now. D, rarest. Okay, so we have simply so many, we have few women in the rarest sense. Alright, so again, similar to choice A, we need some sort of comparison. We gotta have something that's more rare than another choice, than another sense. And the only sense discussed here is the sense right here. And I know that someone will say there's a few and there's so many, and that's kind of like rare versus common, right? But unfortunately, the few and so many only refers to women. There's no the few and many are not referring to particular senses. It's not looking at particular perspectives of looking at women, right? So that makes D an unsupported answer choice because there's just no comparison about the amount of perspectives on women. So that leaves C the correct answer. Number 40. Stanton contends that the situation she describes in the passage has become so dire that even men have begun to blah 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 lament the problems they have created. So the only part where I think there's any kind of lament is over here, where men has stand appalled and mourned. So that's like appalled and mourns. Seems like regret, seems like lament, right? And then what are they lamenting about? Problems that they themselves have created. Is that in the text? Well, at the results, so that's like kind of like problems, the consequences of his own excesses. Okay, so this is stuff that he has caused, the result of his own excesses, his own behaviors, and that makes A supported answer choice. B, join the call for women's suffrage. Well, the idea of women's suffrage has been very prevalent in the passage, but we're talking about men joining the call, and that's something that's absent from the text. Okay, we got phrases like "we asked for a woman enfranchisement," but this "we," do we know if that includes men? Well, that's not explicitly said, so that means we cannot assume that men has joined the call for women's suffrage, and we have to cross B off. Let's look at C. Consider women their social equals. All right. Social equals, any part where we see women, behaving similarly to men is over here. In the men's world, how women is influenced, we got stuff like women must be as near men as possible. So that would seem like women are trying to be equal to men, but unfortunately, this is not something from the men's perspective, and the question is asking for what men are considering women, right? This is that behaving similarly to men is just something for women to keep a foothold in society. And also, we got words like as near like men. That's not the same thing as equal, right? So because of the absence of what men are thinking about women and the word equal itself, we know that C is an incorrect answer choice. How about D? Ask women how to improve civic life. Alright, so women improve civic life, like women's suffrage, has been a really important part of the passage, and we got lots of mentioning of how, women ideals and women characteristics will help the world be a better place, at least according to the author. But we don't see men ever asking women for it. Okay, we do see the author saying that the need of this hour is blah 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 blah, women's suffrage and stuff like that. But such need is not expressed by the men, right? This is just a statement. This is the opinion of the author, not and the author is not a man, as you can recall, Elizabeth. So we're gonna cross D off, leaving A to be the correct answer. Alright, down to the last two questions here. And well, okay, number 41 isn't even much of a question because it's a best evidence question. So where did we find the evidence for part A? Well, I remember that somewhere over here was the now part, right? Now, yeah. So this is line 1, 2, 3. So this is line 53. So we need something that's around line 53. Is there anything like that? Alright, cool. Lines 53 to 55. That's where we were just then, and that makes B the correct answer. But let's look at what A, C, and D entails. Lines 25 to 30. 25 to 30. No one need wonder at the... Alright. Incorrect. Straight away. Why? Because that was an opinion of the author. There's no mentioning of the male perspective, what men are thinking, right? And it's always so important for us to just look at whose perspective it is. And that's something that SAT often tests, and something that we could use to eliminate answer choices often. Okay, let's look at C. 56 something, 56 onward. Oh, okay, the need of this hour. We just said that this was not men's perspective. This is what the author is thinking. This is her opinion. And again, we're going to eliminate C. Okay, D. 61 to 64. We ask, okay, we. Yeah, we talked about that as well, right? This we don't know if that includes men. This is more of the opinion of the author, and right? So unfortunately, D is incorrect. And already, just by focusing on the perspective, we have eliminated A, C, and D, as these are all just opinions of the author and not what the question it wants, not the opinion of men. Okay? 42. The sixth paragraph, lines 67 to 78, says, hunt that down. That's this paragraph right here. So the qualification paragraph, okay. is primarily concerned with establishing a contrast between men and women. A contrast between men and women. Alright, let's see if there's any mentioning of women, because we know that this whole paragraph is about men, well, part of it. Alright, so women, we found it. Well, is this woman in general? Well, definitely not, because she is only referring to a subgroup of women who have the characteristics that she's talking about. And this characteristic is described as, male characteristics usually, like, conquering, conquest, exploring, and, forces of nature, battling the forces of nature and, powers of destruction. And that's not a representation of women in general. And because that it was just, a subgroup of women, and here it says women, this distinction allows me to cross out A easily. B, the spiritual world and the material world. There is just one mentioning of spirits right here, and I think most students would agree that this here is not a comparison between spiritual world and material world, because the spirit isn't even talking about, it's not even talking about the spiritual world. It's just referring to, the souls, more of a synonym for people, right? The most beautiful people this world has known, right? I'm going to cross B off. A pretty obvious elimination in my opinion. C, bad men and good men. So for C to be correct, we have to have a discussion, explicit statement of bad men and good men. Let's go back and see if we can find that in the passage. So right away we see that the author is saying that not all men are hard, selfish, and brutal, which are. So she's drawing a distinction between the men, right? But what is more important to notice is that there's no mentioning of good men, and there's no explicit mentioning of bad men. Okay, I know that this could be a bit of a stretch for some of you, but on the SAT we have to be very, very precise about all the wording. Okay, if there's no explicit mentioning of these are bad men and these are good men, and the difference between them is blah 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 blah, we cannot pick that answer choice unless it's the last remaining one. So in this case, process of elimination becomes very, very important. So we're going to cut C out. Okay, D, men and masculine traits. Alright, so that's something that's pretty obvious, and we even mentioned it when we read through the passage, men versus men characteristics. And we see that right away. We talked about it earlier. Characteristics, the masculine element versus men. Okay, she's saying that men are not bad. Not all men are bad. It's just the men with certain characteristics, right? And here's the distinction between choice C and D. Masculine traits is explicitly mentioned in the passage. Masculine elements, masculine characteristics. But bad and good, those two words are absent from the text. And that's what makes C incorrect, but makes D correct. There is a distinction, there is a contrast between men and men's characteristics, right? And she even attributes some women with those characteristics, and she's saying, okay, those women are, not to her liking, at least. So that makes D our correct answer. All right. That marks the end of this passage, end of the series of questions this passage has for us. So if you have any questions about maybe why your choice is incorrect, maybe another evidence that you think could support the correct answer or disprove an incorrect answer, please share that in the comments. If you have any further questions, I can always answer them in the comment section below. But if you felt like you have learned a little bit about just eliminating answers based on author's perspective, and just being really, really, really careful with word choice and tackling an essay or a passage from the 18 somethings, then please give me a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. Now I hope you keep on practicing and get that sweet 1600. Thank you.